that management is responsible for the behaviour within the team. So if they're letting things go on which perhaps are not in alignment with your value set, then that's when you start to get a poor experience, and that's when people start to disengage. So it's really, really important, I think, that linking the values and the behaviours and making sure that those behaviours are lived and breathed every day.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
I am super happy to have you here, ladies. Danielle and Sophie Wood from the Belonging Base. Not the Belonging Base, from Belonging Base.
Belonging Base.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm delighted to be here.
I just said ladies. And I realized that I might have done something already now to sort of lead this conversation somewhere. Is it okay, seeing the work that you do, for me to say ladies to you?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine to say ladies when you're talking about Danielle and myself. But the best thing that you've done is you've actually kind of asked the question, is it okay? Just to confirm that it is okay. And it's that simple when you're talking about the language around diversity, is A, have good intent, and B, seek clarification if you're unsure, because we've clarified everything really quickly and there's an absolute no issue whatsoever.
Okay, so, thank you. Ladies, before we dig into Belonging Base and what this is all about, could you tell me a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, sure, of course. So we're a married couple. I'm Danielle Wood, and this is my wife, Sophie. We live down in the southern part of Spain with our little furry family of 3 rescue dogs, who we're hoping won't make too much of an appearance today. And we're both HR people professionals, and we've both led diversity and inclusion functions. I did that in the UK Police Service, and Sophie has done that in 2 online gaming companies while based in Gibraltar.
Absolutely. So I've been working in Gibraltar companies since 2015, mainly in learning development. So I'd say 50-50 split between learning and development and kind of specific diversity, equality, inclusion and belonging roles. Preceding that, I was working for the UK Police Service, and I worked as a trainer for CID, basically. So I taught detectives how to investigate crime. So I did that for about 12 years.
Now, when you said that, I remember a couple of years ago when you visited the next conference, the conferences that we run in Valletta. And I remember you were talking about, you don't have to bring your whole self to work. But now there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Now, you are here to talk about why belonging matters. And what is it that you do at Belonging Base, and why is this important?
Okay. Well, we decided to take our foot off the corporate merry-go-round and try something new, and sat down and we discussed what the central core focus should be. And so we decided to take some advice from Stephen Covey and start with the end in mind. So a lot of people might recognize the things that go around on LinkedIn, and which says things like diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. So we thought we'd start with the end in mind, which is the outcome, and that's belonging. And I think for us personally, it really resonates because we felt like we belonged in society. And then when Sophie came out as transgender 13 years ago, all of that felt safe to us just kind of disappeared overnight. And that feeling like you don't belong can just have a really profound effect on not only your mental health, but how you show up every day, and especially how you perform at work. So we discussed the fact that, we've both been in the DEIB field for over 20 years, and the dial hasn't really shifted nearly as much as we would have liked to have seen it towards cultures becoming really inclusive and getting that sense of belonging in the workplace. So we believe that the reason for this is that people just don't focus on that outcome enough. They focus on the must-dos and don't focus on what will really make an impact on their cultural change.
Absolutely. And I think also what we put our heart and soul into Belonging Base, and the reason that we chose Belonging, as Danielle said, is because personal experience of being in a minoritized group alongside experience of working as DEI professionals has led us to kind of know pretty much that corporate diversity inclusion very much operates in an echo chamber. So it's kind of characterized by people with really good intent speaking to people who really get diversity inclusion, and that's why they turn up at diversity inclusion events. But what doesn't happen generally is the, say, 80 or 85% of an organization that doesn't care about diversity inclusion, doesn't engage, and those are the actual hearts and minds that you want to change. So we're starting looking at inclusive cultures where everybody can come on the journey. So we're talking about engaging with people at a real micro level. So individuals, team leaders, supervisors, and actually working to create psychologically safe spaces in teams, because everybody can be part of that journey. And we think that if you create teams where people turn up and support each other rather than just transacting with each other, you'll create that feeling of psychologically safe space, and diversity will then be the successful outcome rather than the start of the journey, if that makes sense.
So what do you think that, having said this, what should people focus on to sort of shift that dial, using your own words here?
Yeah. So really, I would urge companies to focus on investing money in educating their supervisors, their team leaders, their managers, their intermediate managers, and their senior managers to have different conversations with each other and with the people that work for them and with them, and focus on things that everybody has in common rather than focusing on all the things that kind of separate us. Because if you focus on everything we've got in common, as I said, then nobody's excluded from that journey. So we talk about, or I talk about, the kind of diversity and inclusion paradox, which is that by focusing on celebrating individual identities, although in itself is good work, by its very nature, it can be just as exclusive for some people as it can be inclusive for others. And that's challenging for the, diversity, inclusion, belonging space. So what we're saying is, if you tackle on the simple things that matter, so teaching people to be kind to each other, to support and understand each other, to treat each other with empathy, and the same with good intent and kindness, then that is what most diversity inclusion schemes or kind of paradigms within an organisation are trying to achieve. But for us, the best way to do that is actually do the hard yards and actually start looking at not just the company values, but the behaviours that underpin those values, and what do those behaviours actually look like? What does success look like at an individual level, a team level, departmental level? And if you get all of that right, then people start, as I say, turning up for each other. Everybody's focused on achieving the goals that the company wants them to achieve. So everybody fully understands where they are in their team, in their department, in their organisation. So there'll be a more efficient workforce. They are more likely to reduce costs in terms of sickness, absence, attrition, and they're also more likely to knock their KPIs or their OKRs, their outputs, out of the park, because they're all hyper-focused on working with each other, for each other, to achieve what the company wants them to achieve.
It's really getting into the mindset of not only the company and the values, but the people in it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
How we act when someone enters a room. I mean, we go through this in team sports with young children. Like, we do say hi to everyone. we move our little mats in the yoga studio so everyone can fit. I mean, these simple, very, very simple tasks, but that doesn't really come natural to everyone.
So I referenced earlier our kind of lived experience. So we've both worked in companies where the company has had loads of great diversity inclusion policies in place. We've worked in companies where there's no policies at all in existence. We've worked in places where there are diverse networks present in the workplace, and we worked in companies where they aren't present. And interestingly, for us, really neither of those things have made a difference to our daily working lives. The thing that's made a work experience good for me or good for Danielle is actually how we're treated by the people around us in our immediate working environment. So the people we work with in our teams, the people who manage us, the people that we liaise with outside of our teams at wider departmental and company level. And it's how we make those human connections and the quality of those connections that actually influence whether I actually had a good day at work, but more importantly, whether I actually feel safe turning up and being myself and giving the best of myself in terms of performing.
Exactly. So where do we start? Where do companies start? Where do people start off, step by step?
So starting point really is to identify a really positive and cohesive value set. And your company values, and this is just our opinion now, should be visceral and lived values within the company, but also be the values that you actually communicate externally to your customers and to, the external world. So there needs to be a parallel between how you represent yourself as a company and how you treat people within the company. So there's that kind of synergy. Because again, that actually creates a sense of authenticity around what you stand for. So that's the starting point, because once you've established your values, all of that high-level thinking is tied up with your sustainable business strategy. So that's where the senior leadership comes in. It's then the responsibility of everybody within the organisation to actually take those values and make them live and breathe, within the workspace. And that's what we're about, is actually looking at the behaviours that underpin those company values and what does it actually look like? How does it manifest itself in the workplace? Danielle's got a great quote, haven't you?
Yeah, one of the people I follow on LinkedIn and I absolutely love is a guy called John Amici, and he talks about behaviour. And one of his quotes is he talks about that your culture is defined by the worst tolerated behaviour, which I find really enlightening, because if you think about that, that's true. We've worked with companies and we did a deep dive with one a global company, International, and it had an employee engagement survey, and the engagement scores ranged from 45 to 95. Now, that business is one which has all the social media going out to sort of like being supportive of diversity and inclusion, etc. But the scores are so very different, and when you delve into those scores and you sort of look at the analytics a bit more, you see that actually the overriding factor that differentiates your experience at work is actually your local management, and that management is responsible for the behaviour within the team. So if they're letting things go on which perhaps are not in alignment with your value set, then that's when you start to get a poor experience, and that's when people start to disengage. So it's really, really important, I think, that linking the values and the behaviours and making sure that those behaviours are lived and breathed every day.
Absolutely. We used a big word there earlier on when we talked about psychological safety. So you've got to say, well, what does that actually mean? And the way that I view psychological safety is if you're in a peer group, and somebody says something inappropriate, or somebody says something that's damaging to one of the group, then it takes a great deal of courage for an individual to put their hand up and challenge that behaviour. It takes a great deal of courage. And most people don't find that courage in the workplace. They're more likely to kind of sit passively and let the toxic behaviour ride, because that's just human nature, because everybody wants to belong to the wider group.
Yes.
So by challenging that behaviour, by contracting the behaviours that underpin these values, then teams can have great conversations about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And then we've got a point of reference so that that person can say, oh, do you remember we said we're not about that in this team, in this company, so you really, shouldn't have said that.
It's encouraging that conscious inclusion, isn't it?
Yeah. So people can bring those challenges to the table without any fear of being treated negatively in response, which traditionally happens in toxic cultures.
I'm also thinking like it's like parenthood. Kids do what you do, not what you say. I mean, this is obviously a passionate topic for you.
Yes.
It's your vocation to spread the word.
Yeah.
When it comes to your own personal journey, and I'm thinking we end off with, I would like to hear from you, what is the worst that has happened to you during your own personal journey, but also to end off with, what's the best that has happened? Okay.
Well, I'll start off talking about the worst, and then Danielle can take the best. So the worst thing, the worst thing that's happened to both of us was very soon after I came out as trans in 2011. So that kind of decision to be my true self was kind of quite a courageous decision, because I was fearful of losing everything that I had in my life. So my job, my house, my relationship with Danielle, relationship with my family, friends, etc. And initially, I did lose all of those things after I came out. Apart from my job, working for the police service, that's the one thing that remained constant in the short term. I'd also tried to engage with the National Health Service in the UK to be supported medically through my transition, and that was really important because I was on a one-way journey, in my life. But quite quickly in that process, I received a letter from the people who funded healthcare in the UK saying that they wouldn't fund my medical treatment. And I was absolutely devastated by that. And that, combined with my family loss, led me into a very low mood, to the extent that I actually tried to take my own life and came really, really close to doing so. And that obviously was a really dark moment for me. Following on from that, I spent a week in a mental health institution, which was really, really scary. And Danielle actually supported me and held my hand through that experience, which, I've thanked my lucky stars that I've got such a beautiful woman who's kind of with me and supported me all the way through this journey. But yeah, so that was the worst thing. So attempting my own life, being in that really dark place, but also losing contact with my family. So since I came out in 2011, my family wrote to me immediately and said they would never be able to accept me. And that's the last contact I had with my mother, father and brother. And that still hurts today. So that's the worst bit. But we did get over it. So I'm going to pass over to Danielle to tell you
about the happiest bit.
And sorry if I started smiling when you said it was a horrible experience being in the mental health institution, because it gets quite paradoxical. Like it should be actually quite good for your mental health to be in such an institution.
Yeah, it's a very unique life experience, which I don't encourage.
Yeah. Don't encourage anyone to try.
It was a very vulnerable time for me.
What about you, Danielle? What's the best?
Okay, so the best, it started off being a little bit like the worst, but then it turned out as the best. So I was really, really struggling with my mental health when Sophie first came out. I felt like my whole world had turned upside down. And I sought the support of a counsellor. And the counsellor sort of like got me to a point where I decided that I could no longer stand all of the white noise that was going on around me. Everybody had an opinion on our situation. Everybody kept telling me what I ought to do. And I decided, I felt like at the time I was being a bit of a coward, and I decided to run away for a while. Now I look back and think, oh my God, I can't believe I actually did that. But I gave up my secure job with the police service, final salary pension scheme and all that. And I literally put everything I could fit in my Fiat 500 and drove down to South Spain and rocked up and got a job on half the salary working in Gibraltar for a recruitment agency servicing the gaming industry. And that was because the counsellor said to me, if you take some time out, take yourself back to when you were a teenager and think about what dreams and hopes you had for your life when you were that age. And I sat and I thought life would look successful if I could live in the sunshine, and I could have a swimming pool in the garden. And those were my very simple life goals. And so I thought, right, okay, that's what I'm going to pursue. And so I came over to here with the intention of maybe staying for 6 months and just getting my head clear, and then deciding what to do with my life. And Sophie came on the trip down with me to deliver me. And when I dropped her at the airport at Malaga to fly back, I just suddenly felt this heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching feeling of, oh my God, what am I doing? Because I love this person. And it took us a long time for you to find a job out here. But once Sophie had found a job out of here, this is the life we'd always imagined. It's the life we'd always dreamed of. And so now I suppose the outcome was that it ended up being a catalyst for us taking our life in the direction that we always wanted to be. So it's a really lovely outcome, I'd say.
Yeah, we always wanted to live a kind of sunshine life together in either kind of Spain or France, but we're never brave enough to make the decision to do it.
Yeah.
And so through our kind of life experience, our hand's been forced.
It took a major life change.
Major life change. Don't recommend it as a
not
as a
make the decision
strategy. But yeah, we're living our best lives at the moment.
Fantastic. That's an amazing thing to hear. Let's end with that positive notion.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And thank you so much for coming today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us. It's been an absolute pleasure.